Monday arrived with the confidence of something nobody had invited. I was 47, gainfully employed, reasonably functional, and already negotiating with myself about getting out of bed. At the time, this qualified as a problem. Had no idea that before the week was over. I would look back on Monday morning with the kind of affection normally reserved for lost civilizations, old routines, and lunches that had not yet become financial decisions. Before going to work to administer other people's lives, I had to administer mine. Bills, appointments, passwords, banking, groceries, calendar reminders, forms I had forgotten I filled out, and messages asking me to verify that I was still me. Apparently, adulthood had evolved into running a tiny, unpaid company whose only employee was also the customer, the accountant, the receptionist, the compliance department, and somehow still behind on everything before 9 in the morning. Then I arrived at the job where I was actually paid to organize things. I was good at it, which sounds positive until you learn the first law of office life. If people discover you can solve problems, they begin bringing you all of them. Usually with the words "quick question," delivered in the hopeful tone of someone who genuinely believes the next 45 minutes will somehow take less than 5. I had heard that phrase enough times to know better. By lunch, I had earned a sandwich and coffee. Financially, however, the sandwich had apparently earned a degree, purchased property, and started contributing to a retirement plan. $24.63 for bread, filling, and caffeine. I paid because I was hungry, but I did spend several seconds looking at the receipt like it had personally betrayed me. Civilization, I concluded, was getting ambitious, and lunch had apparently joined the upper management team. On the train home, I looked around at everyone scrolling, replying, scheduling, queuing, planning, worrying, and generally maintaining civilization one notification at a time. My life wasn't bad. That was almost the strange part. It was fine. Fine had simply become incredibly exhausting. Somewhere between the emails and the errands, I caught myself wondering whether humanity ever figured out how to make ordinary life feel less like maintenance. A few days later, I went to a science museum because apparently my hobbies included making terrible decisions in well-lit public buildings. That was where I found the Chronos Project, an experimental research program studying temporal fields and the possibility of displacement through time. It looked less like a time machine and more like something designed by brilliant people who had received an enormous grant and absolutely no instruction to make it reassuring. Chronos was not presented as a working human time machine. In fact, the exhibit specifically stated that human displacement testing was not authorized, which I found oddly comforting right up until I wondered why anyone had needed to write that sentence in the first place. There are certain warnings that only exist because somebody, somewhere, already asked the question. I was beginning to suspect Chronos had a very interesting internal email history. A researcher announced a scheduled demonstration. It's perfectly safe, completely controlled. I stayed behind the barrier, touched absolutely nothing, and behaved like a responsible adult. I mention this now because history has an unfortunate habit of blaming the nearest woman when experimental machinery develops opinions. The rings began to move, the lights came on, and for one lovely second, everyone in the room continued believing the demonstration was going exactly as planned. Then one ring sped up, another stopped, and the air around me did something air should never do. It seemed to split into several versions of itself. My foot slid toward the machine, even though nothing was touching me. The researcher's face changed. People stopped filming. I remember thinking very clearly that this was no longer included in the price of admission. Somewhere between curiosity and panic, my museum visit officially became an incident. The researcher hit the emergency shutdown. Chronos responded by making everything worse. I reached for the barrier, but every version of my hand seemed to arrive at a slightly different moment. The room fractured into overlapping instants. My body was still mine, but time had stopped agreeing about where to put it. Then, with absolutely no concern for scheduling, consent, or my plans for the evening, Chronos solved the problem by removing me from 2026 entirely. There was no tunnel, no stars, no helpful announcement telling me to remain calm during temporal displacement. Just darkness and fragments of moments sliding past me. Streets, buildings, machines, pieces of lives I couldn't place. I wasn't falling exactly. I wasn't standing either. I existed somewhere between those concepts while time reorganized itself around me. Then a thin line of daylight opened ahead, and apparently chronology had finally decided where to put me. Gravity came back first. Explanations did not. I landed in the middle of a city that made every futuristic movie I had ever seen look embarrassingly underfunded. Buildings curved around gardens hundreds of feet above the ground. Transportation moved without roads. Water ran through public spaces like architecture had finally learned manners. Everyone else was having a perfectly normal day, which was deeply inconsiderate considering mine had just crossed 2,000 years. My first official contact with the future was a robot asking whether I required assistance. It was an excellent question. Required a year, a map, several explanations, probably legal representation, and ideally someone to confirm that I had not died in a museum and entered a very aggressively designed afterlife. I considered giving it the complete list. Instead, because adulthood teaches restraint, I decided to begin with the smallest possible crisis and work outward. So I asked what year it was. The robot answered, 4026, with the emotional intensity of someone telling me the cafe closed at 6. 2,000 years. My brain briefly declined to process the application. I looked at the city, then the robot, then back at the city as if one of them might correct the other. Neither did. Somewhere in my head, every plan I had made for the following week quietly canceled itself without asking for confirmation or offering a refund. Naturally, I checked my phone. When reality becomes impossible, the modern human response is apparently still to see whether the internet has anything useful to say about it. My phone had one contribution: nitrogen monoxide service. 2,000 years of progress, and somehow that feature survived. I stared at the screen long enough to feel insulted, while the robot studied the device with the cautious curiosity of someone being shown an artifact from a civilization that had recently discovered rectangles. The robot told me the city was called Vanta, Central Civic District. Vanta looked like humanity had finally stopped forcing cities and nature into separate corners and decided they could share. Gardens climbed through architecture. Walkways crossed open space. Everything moved quietly, which felt suspiciously efficient. I had no idea where anything was, how anything worked, or why nobody seemed impressed by my leather jacket. Still, my kidnapping by chronology had excellent urban planning. The robot tried to register me. Vanta searched its civic system and found absolutely nothing. According to the most advanced civilization I had ever seen, I did not exist. I found this especially irritating because I was standing directly beside the machine making the accusation. The robot calmly informed me it could not locate me. I briefly considered waving. Apparently in 4026, being physically present and being administratively present were still two completely different achievements. Apparently, woman with no identity who claims to be 2,000 years old exceeded the capabilities of the local help kiosk. So I was escalated to CIV1, civic irregularity verification. Humanity had conquered architecture, transportation, robotics, and probably several laws of physics. Departments, however, remained undefeated. The building was serene, beautiful, and deeply unhelpful in the way only an institution can be when it has an elegant name and no signs explaining what happens inside. Eventually, a human reviewer asked where I was from. I told her 2026, for the first time since I arrived. Somebody in the future looked almost as confused as I felt, and I appreciated that more than I expected. Confusion is surprisingly comforting when it becomes a group activity. She had the expression of someone who had seen every strange case her job could produce and had just discovered the universe had been saving one special file for the end of her shift. CIV1 searched backward instead of forward. 2,000 years backward. And there I was, 47, administrative assistant, August 2026. Then they found the museum report, Chronos Project incident. One visitor unaccounted for, me. I had spent one afternoon in 4026. Back home, I had been missing for 2,000 years. Seeing your own face listed as a historical record is a very efficient way to make your day feel both extremely important and completely finished. I asked whether they could send me home. The answer was not exactly no. Unfortunately, it was also nowhere near yes. They knew of no method capable of returning me. But my arrival proved temporal displacement had happened once, which apparently made me both a person and a research opportunity. The reviewer said my arrival changed what they thought was possible. I held on to that sentence because when someone tells you there is no known way home, not impossible, starts sounding generous. Since nobody could send me home immediately, Vanta did the next logical thing. Gave me somewhere to live. Temporarily, nobody seemed interested in defining temporarily, which I considered suspicious. The residence was beautiful enough to make suspicion inconvenient, but I had still gone from museum visitor to provisional resident of 4026 in a single afternoon. One must be stranded 2,000 years from home. Apparently, the future believes in decent housing and vague lease terms. The residents discovered I was from 2026 and immediately tried to make me comfortable. A sofa appeared, television, outlets, a lamp, even a charging cable. My entire century had apparently become an interior design setting. The worst part was that it was accurate. Nothing makes you feel young quite like watching your normal life reconstructed as historical ambiance, while a building politely assumes you may require period-appropriate furniture to prevent emotional distress. Then everyone left. It's for the first time since Chronos. Nobody was scanning me, questioning me, escorting me, assigning me, or explaining technology I did not understand. I sat on a reconstructed 2026 sofa and looked out at a city 2,000 years beyond everything I knew. That morning, I had been annoyed about Monday. Now Monday was ancient history. I was just beginning to appreciate the silence when the purse beside me made a sound I recognized immediately. My phone still said nitrogen monoxide service, but underneath it was a message from Chronos Project Control, dated 18 August 2026. Alex, can you hear us? I read it once. Then again, then a third time because apparently repetition is what the human brain does when reality becomes unacceptable. Somehow across 2,000 years, the people at the machine had found a way to reach me. My thumb hovered over reply. For the first time all day, home no longer felt completely unreachable. I was about to answer when the door opened and a short, wide robot walked in, clipped one shoulder on the frame, adjusted, and carried on as if the doorway had miscalculated. BOB 741 announced he was assigned to my temporal integration. Bob, I said. He objected. I overruled him. Then the apartment asked, restore current year configuration. I looked at Bob, then at my reconstructed 2026 living room. Absolutely. In retrospect, that was my second questionable decision of the day.